without any further ado, I'm going to welcome my good friend who is officially a legend, officially a legend, Steve Smith.
Wow. Well,
Well,
hello, Johnny.
hi,
Good to see
Steve.
you. Great to see you. Yeah.
Great to see you too. Congratulations on the book. I've
Thank you. Thank you.
felt for a long time that you're a legend, but it's official now. I mean,
It is,
it's in
especially with
writing.
it is on the cover, endorsed by Modern Drummer magazine.
Exactly. Well,
Well,
yeah. Hey, Bob Sidlowski says hello, by the way. He's watching. Our
oh,
old
all
friend
right.
Bob. Cool.
Yeah. From
Um,
Sonar USA many years ago.
many, many years ago,
Yes. Yes.
that voice, that baritone voice in the phone, Bob Sidlowski. Remember that voice?
I do.
But Steve, yeah, and I not certainly not joking about how great the book is because you were nice enough to send me in advance and Modern Drummer as well to sort of get acquainted with it, and it's phenomenal. It's just a
Well,
congratulations to you
yeah, thank you.
on a great job. You're welcome.
Yeah. Let me just point out what it is, what the book is. Because sometimes I tell folks about the book and they're really not clear about what it is because Modern Drummer has offered something in the past that is called the Artist Pack. For
Yes.
example, the Steve Smith Artist Pack, which is, it's a PDF that has a lot of the interviews that I've done over the years in a PDF. And when I was first approached to do the Legends book, I thought maybe it was just that, but they made it into a hardcover book. But it's not that, though it includes a lot of the material that comes with an artist pack. So basically, that I've been on the cover of Modern Drummer 5 times, and and I did a feature story before my first cover story. So I have 6 features. So they
Yeah.
include all 6 features over the years,
Yeah. 40
and
years,
and
basically. Yeah.
yeah, and then there is all kinds of other stuff like transcriptions, certain transcriptions from uh, all kinds of different recordings that I've done over the years, from Journey records to John-Luc-Ponty and different fusion records and rock records that I've played on. There was the one part that I found it was very challenging to get together is they wanted a comprehensive list, description, and photos of every drum set that I've ever owned.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that
Yeah.
was a challenge, but it's kind of cool that it's all in there, going all the way back to my first Rogers kit from like 1967 or something like that, when I first got that. And then there's columns. I have written a couple of columns for Modern Drummer over the years, so they included that.
Hmm.
One is a diary of all this stuff that happened in 2005, just in a 2-month period where there was
Yeah.
a lot of travel. And then there's an Indian rhythms column that I wrote. They included that, which is cool because it's for people interested. It's very detailed. But with all of that, in a way, the main feature is a brand new interview by Mark Griffith.
Yes.
And that is very detailed, very long. And Mark, who is a longtime friend of mine and collaborator in a lot of different musical situations where I've hired him as a writer to write liner notes for my albums, to write some things for Hudson Music, like the Brushes video that Adam Nussbaum and I put together. Mark wrote the accompanying book about brushes. So, he knows a lot about drum history, about jazz drumming. So he, in fact, interviewed me for this, and he had a very cool concept. He read all of the interviews, all 6
Oh,
previous interviews, and he felt like, well, all of these interviews are essentially about Journey or Vital Information, but I know you've done a lot of other gigs. Because
yeah.
in fact,
Yeah.
he's come to most or a lot of my gigs around New York City. And I've done a lot of gigs organized by a producer named Milan Simic.
Mhm.
And so Mark wanted to talk about those gigs and basically anything else he could find reference to that was an undocumented gig that I had done. Some gig over the last 45 years that was not recorded or talked about or anything, but somehow there was a reference and he knew about it. And then he would say, well, what about this? And so that is so it's a very different kind of modern drummer interview in that we do touch on Journey, we do touch on Vital Information, but the majority of the interview is about all of these other gig situations.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't realize that I mean, I saw that when I read Mark's, the most recent interview where he said, we've talked a lot about, there's enough, I forget how he said it. It was great though. He said, everybody's covered Journey, so we're going to move on from there. And I thought,
Yeah,
I can always hear about Journey. To me, there's always something maybe new that I haven't heard that you'll tell me. But in any case, I loved his strategy of just kind of
yeah,
filling in all those gaps and blanks around the
yes,
most notable gigs like Journey and Vital Information. And uh,
right.
and and I'm so glad you mentioned that because I wanted to give a shout out to Mark Griffith and David Frangione and everybody at MD, uh, and especially Mark because I read that recent interview and we talked on the phone, you and I, about this, and it was incredible how deep you guys got into it. I mean, like, it's
Yeah,
worth people buying this book for that. I really mean it. I mean, that's a heavy, like, no stone unturned kind of
right.
deep dive interview.
We met up in my New York apartment twice, face to face. Like most, he's done a lot of these interviews. He did Kenny Aronoff and Peter Erskine and Danny Serpin and Chad Smith, all their Legends books. But those were done by Zoom.
Hmm.
But he
Yeah.
lives close enough to New York, and we masked up and then and social distance, and then we talk. I think the first time we did 6 hours, and the second day we did 8 hours. And I'm going, Mark, come on, we got to stop. Because no, man, I got more notes. So it
Oh
was,
man.
really long and detailed discussions that were, they're edited down to a large degree and focused, but we really did get into it.
Yeah, it's great. And just, I should back up a second, and I guess I'm probably assuming too much. If people don't know this, Steve's Series book is available now as a download, as a digital download, and you can pre-order the book version of it for May. Is it the sometime in May that
May
I,
20th.
May 20th? Okay, thank you,
Yep.
Steve.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this as well, but there's also a code to download your solo drum record, the Fabric of Rhythm,
Yes.
which um, is amazing. We talked about this. Listening to that record, and we'll come back to that because I don't want to jump too far ahead at this moment.
Okay.
Um, but I would just encourage everybody when you listen to that, stating the obvious here, put on a really good pair of headphones when you listen to that because you won't believe sonically how incredible this record is. It's the best sounding drum record, Steve, I've ever heard. I mean that.
Really?
Yeah, I mean
Wow.
it has. I mean, I wanted to ask you, did you produce that yourself and engineer it?
I didn't engineer. I'm not an engineer. I mean, we have Simon Phillips and Dave Weckl are two
Yeah, yeah,
amazing drummers, and they're really great engineers. But no, that's not a part of my musical
yeah. No, it's
vocabulary. So, but I did produce the record. So, meaning like, I organized the session, but I did it. Right now. I'm in Ashland, Oregon, and I did it at a little studio here in Ashland, Oregon. And there's a couple pictures in there from the session. Essentially, um, Sylvia Massey is the lady that owned the studio. It's actually not there any longer. And Sylvia has a long history of being an engineer for a lot of like metal records, heavy metal and rock and roll records. And
yeah,
she moved to Ashland and bought a church and set up her studio in a church. So it's literally like this big, huge room. And And so we set up my kit, and Nick Kirby, a local engineer and bass player, drummer that lives here in Ashland, engineered
Okay.
the record
Yeah.
and did an amazing job. So I used the same Sonar SQ2 kit for the entire album, but I did, change out the snare drums a lot. I used the
Mhm.
Korg wave drum in mixed in with the sounds occasionally. Some of the drumming is just live, beginning, middle, and end. And some of the pieces, they required a lot of overdubs because I envisioned them more like a total composition
Mhm.
with conical overdubs or snare drum overdubs, like doubling snare drum parts or something like that. So it's so I'm glad that you liked it and the
Loved it. Yeah.
sound. And there was one aspect that Nick came up with an idea, is that I used a drum set with a big bass drum, actually 20 by 20. It's an unusual Sonar bass drum
Yeah.
size, but it sounds pretty amazing. And then 8, 10, and 12 rack toms, 14, 16, 18-inch floor toms, 3 floor toms. And he had the idea to put a sub kick underneath the 18-inch floor tom, which is
Ah.
something that I always do now. Because if I use 3 toms and I have 3 floor toms and I have that 18-inch floor tom, I'll put that sub kick underneath it, and it sounds just amazing. It's like this huge,
Yeah.
like a timpani or something,
That explains the. I was going to say
Yeah,
the lowest tom that I heard. Um, it was so incredibly, but it was like organic sounding. Do you know what I mean?
yep,
It didn't sound compressed and processed. They sounded like
right,
open drums, and that low tom was incredible. Yeah, it rumbled.
yeah, yeah. And
And
I favor a lot of room sound in my drum mixes, so it sounds
yeah,
as natural as recording can be, but something like you're in the room, not like a tightly mic'd and mixed drum sound. It's just the organic sound of the drums, and I think that comes across. But to talk about what that is, I originally made this recording, and it's an album with 14 solo drum pieces on it, and I made it for vinyl LP, and it's 22 minutes a side, 7 solos a side, and that was for my art art project with Scene 4, and they put out a book, like a coffee table book with all of my art, and then had the idea they wanted to put an LP in there. So the best idea they had was, why don't you talk about the art and describe it, and we'll put it on an LP. And I said, no, I don't want to do that, but I do have a better idea. Why don't I make a solo for each piece of art and record that? And so they liked that idea. So in a way, it felt like I was writing a soundtrack for each piece of art,
hmm
which gave me something to go on. Like, the first thing is, I could remember what I was doing playing wise to make the art. And to make this art, you go into a room, turn off all the lights, play the drum set with lighted sticks, and then there's like a time lapse photography, so you see the motions,
yeah,
that's why I called it fabric of rhythm. It's like you could see the fabric, like the inner workings of the rhythms as I played them on the drums. And then we decide which images look the best. There's some computer enhancement of the images, and then they are put on canvas, and they look convincingly like artwork.
they look beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah, they're pretty cool. So I made an album of 14 solos to go along with that on an LP. So, but it's never been released digitally. So
right.
that's I thought, well, let's include that with this Modern Drummer Legends book. So if you buy the book, you get a download code, and you can download those 14 tracks and hear these solo drum pieces. And it's not unprecedented to make a solo drum record. I mean, one of my heroes that was my first inspiration for this kind of thing is Max Roach,
Right. Yep.
because Max has made a few albums of strictly drum solo pieces. He's also made some records where there's there's an album called Drums Unlimited where there's 3 solo pieces and then like 3 or 4 band pieces all mixed in. And I've been putting solo pieces on my albums over the years. So it's not like a new concept for me to do solo drum set pieces, but I had never made an entire album of solo drum pieces, and I'd always wanted to, well, not always, but let's say for the last 20 years, I've thought, it would be nice to do that. And this was finally the situation came up where I did it.
It's great. And also in the book, you you basically give a description of each track.
Yes.
And which is really great too, where you can sort of read along and while you're listening to it. And I think it helps you sort of get more into the, inside it that way, which is really cool.
Yeah, well, that's why, they asked me, Modern Drummer asked me to do that. And yeah, I think it's worth doing because hopefully it does help one get a little more insight into what's going on with the solo.
Yeah, no, it's no stone unturned. And you mentioned going back a second, talking about all the different drum sets. And again, I think that me, like as a gear nut, I think was one of the coolest parts of the book. I mean, there's many cool parts, but just like you said, going back to pictures of you with your Rogers set, your Gretsch set, which maybe did that come after that, or was it a Slingerland kit?
The sequences. The first kit was a Rogers kit, a Champagne Sparkle Rogers kit, and then there was a white Slingerland kit.
Right.
Double rack toms, 2 floor toms, 20-inch bass drum, and then a Gretsch kit in like a serious jazz kit, like an Elvin Jones or Tony Williams or Art Blakey kit, like 18-inch bass drum,
12 and 14.
12 by 8 and a 14 by 14 floor tom snare drum. And then I had my 2 cymbals like way up. Like I had seen Eric Gravatt or Alphonse Mouzon play. And that was like hip at the time, especially to be when I was at Berklee, because I was at Berklee from 72 to 76. And so it was cool to have a Gretsch kit because, some of the most serious players that I was studying and going to see live played Gretsch. So yeah.
Yeah.
But then do you remember the early Steve Gadd kit that I talked about? Did you ever hear about that kit or know about that kit?
No, I don't think so. I know Steve had an older Gretsch kit, like a walnut finish, the wood.
No, well, when Steve Gadd first came on the scene, making a lot of the albums that he was recording in those years, like in the early 70s, he had this kit that had a Gretsch bass drum and then some pearl concert toms.
That's right. Fiberglass shell.
Yeah.
Yes,
and I had heard about those. And in fact, I went to see him play at McKell's with Stuff way back when he and Chris Parker were the drummers with Stuff. And I thought that was a really cool kit. So that's another one. I didn't have a picture of that kit, but that's another one described that I had a kit like that made too, because I was such a huge fan, and I love that sound that he was getting on records. And so, so it goes on. And then how I first got into Sonar drums comes up in there too.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty fascinating. Just talking about the sort of, I mean, you stop me if this is wrong, but you originally, I mean, you had the gig with John-Luc-Ponty, and you were looking for some just kind of not heavier sounding, but bigger sounding drums.
Yeah, when I first went out on would tour with Jean-Luc in 1976, the fall of 1976, I had put together like this hybrid Gretsch kit, I had two Gretsch kits, so, white one with a 20-inch bass drum, and then the walnut kit with the 18-inch bass drum. And I put the both of them together and used them on tour. And Jean-Luc he wanted, he called a Billy Cobham kit. And what he meant is a big double bass kit that would have a big sound on stage, and it would look really cool on stage. And, I tell the story in the book, but I had seen Bernard Purdy do a clinic at Wurlitzer, where you used to work.
Right.
But this was before you worked there.
It was before I worked there,
Yeah, and it was probably like 1975 or 1976. And Bernard did, and he was a Sonar endorser, and he did like a very thorough clinic about what's so great about Sonar drums. And it just made such an impression on me that when I was looking to buy this big kit, I decided I wanted to get a Sonar drum set. And luckily, the Sonar distributor was actually in Massachusetts. So the U.S. distributor was Charles Alden Music.
I remember.
Yeah. And Charles Alden, he's no longer with us, but one thing he was known as, he was Alan Dawson's teacher.
I don't know if I knew that. Wow.
Yeah, he goes way back. So he originally, I think, was one of Alan Dawson's teachers, but then he got into the business side of music and business and started a distribution company and did lots of stuff. But so I was able to go to the U.S. distributor, which was not far from where I lived in Massachusetts, and actually picked out that first Sonar kit with two 24-inch bass drums and 3 rack toms, and 16 by 16 and a 18 by 16 floor tom. So they were huge. So it took some getting used to.
Yeah,
coming from playing more of a small jazz kit, and my background was more jazz. And we talked about this in the interview too. It's like I wasn't playing fusion in those days. I was playing like pretty much straight ahead jazz, and then the occasional like R&B, top 40 GB gig, as we call them in the Boston area, general business gigs.
Right. Yeah, GB. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was like I was learning how to play fusion in real time while touring with Jean-Luc-Ponty.
Wow. Well, so how did that come about to play with him? Was it because was it like you're soloing? I mean, if you weren't really a fusion drummer yet, but he wanted you in the band, was it because he wanted somebody with more of a straight ahead background that could?
No. I mean, let me, like when it came to what the students were playing at the school, we were mainly in those years, if I'm remembering correctly, we were mainly playing like pretty straight ahead jazz, but not like old, not like swing jazz, not like coming from the swing era. We're talking like the jazz of the 60s, like Miles Davis with Tony Williams and Ron Carter and Herbie Hancock, and pretty loose in a way, or the music of John Coltrane with Elvin Jones. Like we were getting into that kind of energy. And the other big influence at the school was Gary Burton and the ECM sound. That label, the German label ECM, had a particular kind of sound where it was kind of ethereal and free and loose kind of playing. Bob Moses was a big influence around, the Boston area. So, and he had just made that great record with Pat Metheny and Jaco Pastorius, Bright Size Life. So a lot of that music was going on at that time. So the playing was a little more free and jazz oriented. Though, if I go down to jazz workshop, I'd see Tony Williams' New Lifetime, where he's playing full on, with rock fusion with Alan Holdsworth on guitar and Alan Pasqua on keyboards, Tony Newton on bass, or Billy Cobham's band, the Crosswinds band with Mike and Randy Brecker, John Abercrombie. Like I saw those bands, and they were like completely high energy rock fusion. but we that still wasn't crossing over into what the students at Berkeley at that time were focused on. So when Jeff Berlin was a bass player that I hooked up with at Berkeley and played with a lot, he got called to do an audition for John-Luc-Ponty to help John-Luc-Ponty audition drummers is actually the best way to put it, because
I see.
yeah, all these characters. So Mark Cranny was the drummer with Jean-Luc-Ponty, and he had just made an album with Jean-Luc called Imaginary Voyage. But at the very last minute before the tour, Mark Cranny quit Jean-Luc's band, and he went on tour with Tommy Bolin.
Oh, Tommy Bolin. Yes.
Yeah, Tommy Bolin. And interestingly, I've been talking with Nard and Michael Walding a lot lately. So I think that there's like some, and because Nard has said that he had just quit Tommy Bolin because he had played with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. He had made some recordings with Jeff Beck, made a recording with Tommy Bolin, and then Weather Report asked him to join Weather Report. And he decided he wanted to play rock. And so he joined Tommy Bolin, but then after a while he quit. Mark Cranny took his place. And then so there was an opening, opening for a drummer for Jean-Luc. So Jean-Luc auditioned a bunch of drummers in LA. And then he came to New York, used Jeff Berlin as his audition bass player. And Jeff recommended me. So I say how I got the gig is there was about 7 or 8 of us in a cattle call audition. And I was maybe the only or one of the only drummers that could actually read music. So there was a lot of drummers that went in and played with Jean-Luc, and like what the audition consisted of is he had me play a duet with him in 7. We played some music in odd times, and then he put Imaginary Voyage in front of me, which was a pretty big piece of music with a lot of odd time signatures and stuff. And I sight read it with no mistakes, and that did it. I think and I could play fusion kind of just organically, because what it is just a combination of jazz and rock in a particular, direction. And I could just organically do it. I hadn't, let's say, studied it per se, which I did later,
right?
But I just could organically do it. So he said, I want you to join, go on tour with me, not join the band. It's like, he's hired me as a sideman. And so I had to convince my parents that I should quit Berkeley and go to Los Angeles and rehearse for a couple of days and then go on tour. And then interestingly, the second gig that I did with him is Soundstage, that TV show called Soundstage.
Oh, yeah.
And that has surfaced on YouTube. So if you like go to YouTube and look up Jean-Luc-Ponty on Soundstage, 1976, that's me playing my second gig with Ponty.
Yeah, great. Everybody take note of that.
Yeah, with the hybrid Gretsch kit before the Sonar kit.
Before the Sonar kit.
Yeah.
An amazing, I was going to say an amazing journey, but it's an evolution. All these words. But,
yeah.
No, but I remember. I want to jump backwards. When I was working at Wurlitzer, I went down to Charles Alden Music. Went down there a few different times to pick stuff up, and he was in Walpole, Mass, as you say. He was not far from where he grew up in Whitman, on the South Shore. It's where Tracy, my sister-in-law, lives now. In fact, in that town.
Oh, okay.
But I remember seeing a picture of you. Now, this would have been the early 1980s. Yep. So you were already officially a Sonar endorser, and there was a big poster. I feel like it was, well, I don't know. I'm in my mind, I'm picturing a white drum kit, but it could have been like it could have been your.
No, it was a white drum kit. I remember the poster, and it was taken at like Wrigley Field or something. Yeah, I remember that.
And but in that poster, I hope it's the same one we're both thinking of. You had Paiste cymbals in that particular.
I did.
Which I didn't know, which it didn't really occur to me at the time. I didn't know you yet. I was years before I'd worked for Zildjian. And then sometime later, when you and I got to know each other in the late 80s, you shared the story with me, what I'm getting
It's
at,
in the
Steve, is
book. I
yeah, which is
talk
great. I know, and I won't
about.
give away a lot of these great things
Yeah,
that are in the book, but I think it's great that you really flesh out that whole situation and how all that evolved, and we'll just kind
right,
of leave it at that. But I want people to, another reason to get this book is just to, there's such great insights about equipment, about why you choose to play what you play and why you've played them forever, really.
right.
I mean, Peisty for a minute, but Zildjian for 40, going on 45 years. So it's incredible, really. I don't know anybody that's had those kinds of. There's probably a few guys, but those kinds of long-term relationships, and
Right. Well, every company that I endorse, I've endorsed for, yeah, like 45 years or close to that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what's great about it is, I mean, obviously you're a loyal guy, but I mean, there's a reason. Um, you have a specific sound. There's a reason why you choose the instruments you choose, and
Yeah.
otherwise you wouldn't choose them. I mean, it's that simple. It's like this is you
Right.
say it in the book. This I play these these companies because it's what I love, and that's that. And as a result, it's become your sound, and that's kind of where I was leading to with this whole
Right.
long thing was. But there's some great insights and some great backstories to a lot of this stuff. I think people would really enjoy reading about.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, because, I did want to go back and explain that whole incident, with Pisces, which is, you know, again, I'm not, yeah, like you said, I'm not going to get into it because it's all very deep, well explained
It is, yeah.
in the book. But I will say this: during that time the short time that I did endorse Pisces symbols, I could never find a ride symbol that I liked. So I always used the Zildjian ride symbol,
Hmm.
and I do mention that. And at
You
that
do,
time,
yeah.
it was this 24-inch ping ride, which I still have, but man, it weighs over 10 pounds.
I was gonna say
I
it's gotta be
I said like
heavy.
I Paul Francis wanted to check it out at the factory, when he was there a couple years ago, and I sent it to him, and he's like, "Man, this thing is like over 10 pounds." Is one heavy symbol.
But
But
for
that's
but
what I
it,
used on, the Journey records, like, and the Jean-Luc-Ponty record,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Journey records, like all, that I used that big heavy ride symbol.
But
So
I'll just say it's one of those. I know the symbol you're talking about too, and it's a heavy symbol, but it doesn't sound like it doesn't record like a clangy heavy symbol. It's very
right,
musical
no,
sounding. It's a great
yeah, and
sounding
a good bell.
and a great bell. And so
Yeah,
one last thing about symbols, and I
yeah,
just made
yeah,
a
yeah,
note. So and so Any Way You Want It, you recorded that in 1980, I think. Does that
yeah.
sound right?
That sounds
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So by then, I think you were officially with Zildjian, thereabouts, right? I
Well,
think you.
actually, something. I have this. Give me 1 second.
Okay. I'm putting you on the spot, Steve.
Yeah. No, look at this.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And you sent me this. So let me. And you're on here,
I know that signature anywhere.
and it says October 10, 1979 is
Okay.
when is
When
when
you.
I signed with Zildjian, and this is like a 30-year
Hmm.
award that you sent. So
Oh, that's
there's
cool.
the official date that I signed and dated a Zildjian endorsement, October 10, 1979. So yes, I would have been a Zildjian endorser by Any Way You Want It.
By Any Way You Want It, 1980. So not to put you on the spot with this question, but
Yeah.
the China that you play during the coda as the song fades, that was that a Peisty
Oh,
2002?
it
Do
could
you know?
have been, but you know what? I don't remember. Does it
Okay.
sound like it?
Well, it does sound like it, and I only asked because since I've been reading this book, I actually
Yeah.
saw some pictures where it looked like you had all Zildjians except maybe a 2002, that square cup china.
Right.
It's so
There are
identifiable.
some pictures. There are some pictures I've seen where I've had that Pisces china, which I did like.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That was
not
a pretty
those.
good. That was a pretty good china.
Yeah, a
So I don't
22,
know that it was a 22, or could have been a
22.
24 even.
Well, it's got such a roar, and it doesn't sound like a
Yeah,
swish, you know. And it was before Zildjian made a square cup china in those days. It just made an A
yeah,
Zildjian, you know, rounded bell swish. But it
right.
anyway, I wondered that because I whenever I hear that song, it sounds so great that the you know what you're playing at the end of that.
I don't remember what it was, but I will go back and listen now. So you're
Okay.
talking about the fade on Any Way You Want
Yeah, yeah,
It. Okay,
yeah.
I'll check it out.
Okay, check it out. I didn't mean to take us down a rabbit hole. Sorry about that, Steve.
That's okay. People will
Oh,
appreciate that.
yeah. You know, and the great thing about you is that, you know, you'll say yes, it was, or no, it wasn't. You know, you're not gonna feel like you have to
No, I won't
not
make
say,
something up.
make something up. Yeah, exactly. Um, so, I mean, is it safe to say that this book, right up to this moment, and I mean, it could all change tomorrow because you're always doing new things, but this is pretty much like it encapsulates your almost entire life's body of work. Would you say that this, like
Yeah,
what
it's
you've
the
documented?
most complete documentation to date
Yeah.
of my career. I guess and beyond and before, like before my career. Let's say my career started probably. It's hard to say when one's career actually starts. Like
Mm-hmm.
because I was playing gigs around Boston and and playing gigs when I was in junior high and high school. But that's more like training.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in a way you could say my like actual career started in 1976, like leaving Boston and going on tour with John-Luc-Ponty, which, at this point that's 45 years. And it coincides with like 1977 is when I started endorsing Sonar, or I actually didn't start endorsing them in 77, but that's when I got my first Sonar kit. So let's just
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
that date. So it's been 45 years. So let's say I've had a career of 45 years, and this is, it's pretty detailed encapsulation summary of those 45 years.
That was my takeaway as well.
Yeah.
And you know what, I think it's safe to say that you buying your first set of Sonar drums in 1977 really kind of constitutes an endorsement on your part. So even if you hadn't
Yeah.
signed a contract with them, you've been playing, endorsing those drums for 45 years. And
Right.
um, I was going to ask you when you were mentioning just kind of when your career started. I know, like in high school, you've talked about like your influences, you know, in your younger days were like Ginger Baker and Mitch, like rock drummers like Ginger and Mitch Mitchell, and um,
Yeah.
I think you did you even mention Ian Pace as
I did.
I think as an influence? Yeah. So
Yeah.
would you say that um, I mean, you started to get more heavily into jazz before you got to Berkeley. That didn't happen kind of that late into your drumming. I'm guessing by your sort of mid-teenage years, you started to shift a little bit. You went to that camp where you met Peter.
Actually, no, no, I identified myself as a jazz drummer from pretty much from the very beginning.
You did. Okay.
I did. Yeah. And that had to do with the drum teacher that I went to study with, Billy Flanagan.
Yep.
I started in the fourth grade, just at a like a school assembly where somebody from a music store in Brockton, Beans Music, I don't know, somehow
Yeah.
that word, was there a
Charlie Bean,
Bean?
right? Charles
Charlie
Bean.
Bean. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right, so he came.
Beautiful Brockton.
Yeah, he came to my little Whitman high fourth grade assembly, and I think he could play, like he played a little trombone, he played some clarinet, he played some trumpet, and he played some drums, and then everyone, it was like a demonstration, and at the end of the assembly you could pick your instrument. So I decided I wanted to play the drum. That was like that moment,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I started by studying with the band director in at my fourth grade. But my parents figured out quickly enough that he wasn't a drummer.
Hmm.
I don't know what his main, but when you're a music educator like that, you have to play a little bit of everything. So,
Yeah.
he showed me basically how to hold the sticks and how to read quarter notes and the measure of 4/4. But they decided I needed a private teacher, which was really totally right on, like a great decision. And they found me Billy Flanagan, who's a drum teacher in Brockton, like literally around the corner from where my dad worked at the Brockton Enterprise. So he worked at the Brockton Enterprise, 60 Main Street, and like you go right around the corner, and there was a little drum shop, Billy Flanagan's drum shop,
Wow.
and he taught, and his two spinster sisters, Ida Flanagan and Alice Flanagan, worked in the drum shop.
Wow. Cool.
And it was small. It was like a hole in the wall,
Yeah. Yeah.
like the size of like a small coffee shop or something. And
Hmm.
you go in, there'd be like maybe one drum set in the window, and then like a bunch of sticks, and then some hardware and drum heads and cymbals. And then upstairs, you go up, and he had like a set of timpani, a set of vibes, an old like leady drum set that he played, and then two practice pads and two music stands. So I studied with him, and he was a jazz drummer. So it just seemed like he taught me how to play, and he was
Hmm.
into jazz, so I was into jazz. It
Yeah.
was really basic like that. It was just
Yeah.
and at that time, I would I would hazard to say almost every drum teacher was a jazz drummer in those days. It
I
was
think you're right.
1963. There were no like rock teachers yet, because like rock drumming was a pretty new idea
Hmm.
in those
Hmm.
years. So I studied with him, and we spent a couple of years on the practice pad learning rudiments and reading, and then got got to a snare drum one year, and did about close to a year on just a snare drum, and then got my first drum set. So the first thing I learned on a drum set was how to play the jazz ride beat, and 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, and 4/4 on the bass drum. And then the Ted Reed syncopation book played, like the way Alan Dawson
Yeah.
taught it, like reading the rhythms like with the left hand, or with the left hand and the right foot. And then the Jim Chapin book, Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer, that the blue book with the red
Yeah. Yeah.
binder. And so that was my orientation. So actually, when you mentioned Mitch Mitchell and Ginger Baker, like I actually couldn't even relate to rock drumming until I heard those guys.
Interesting, because of their jazz sort of.
Yeah, because they were so jazzy sounding. Like when I
Yeah.
heard originally, Ringo and Charlie Watts, and I saw like uh, Dave Clark 5 on TV, I didn't really relate to that, and there was a few reasons. One is they played match grip. It was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I had never seen anyone play match grip before. Really, and you
Yeah.
put yourself back in that time
Sure.
time
Yeah.
slot. Like nobody played match grip except for some of those British drummers, and then of course there was some U.S. drummers that were doing it, but I hadn't seen them yet. And the kind of simplicity of the drumming, it I was oriented already towards Louis Bellson and Buddy Rich and Joe Morello, and that was what my teacher was having me listen to. So that had a big influence on me. But when I heard Mitch Mitchell, it actually to me sounded like Buddy Rich, kind of playing jazz rock.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you listen to that Buddy Rich album called Buddy and Soul, and I don't know, it's not one of his better albums, but interestingly, the whole album is like rock oriented, big band arrangements of rock tunes. Buddy sounds pretty amazing playing rock, and to me, that's what Mitch Mitchell sounded like. And then I could relate to Ginger Baker's playing, and Ian Pace and John Bonham. And then by that time, I was getting more into rock music in general. So it was like a balance. Like I had a balance. I'd have the jazz records and the rock records,
Yeah.
And they weren't always about drumming, because I still have a lot of my old collection. I had like Crosby, Stills and Nash and James Taylor,
Hmm.
and records that I wouldn't have been Carole King, So I was kind of pretty open, listening to all kinds of music, and not always about drumming.
Right, right. But I could see how guys like Ginger and Mitch could sort of open your mind more or less to like wanting to listen to other rock drummers because they were sort
Yeah,
of the gateway to it for you.
they
You
were.
know?
And
Yeah.
then I
I mean,
went back and could appreciate the more, you know, fundamental beginnings of, the beauty of what Ringo has has to offer as a composer. It's like that's in a way his, he was the beginning of a new paradigm that the drumming world hadn't quite realized in those
mhm.
years. He was a part writer of those songs in my mind. The way his parts were so perfect for the music, and the same with Charlie Watts and
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dave Clark. I'm not going to say that about Dave Clark, because he actually, I
It was
found out now, he didn't even play on those records. It was
right.
Bobby Graham that played on
Bobby
the
Graham.
records, and then the records that Bobby Graham didn't play on them was Clem Cattini.
Right,
So,
right.
but Dave Clark he was in the control room producing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's some really good stories about that in the Hudson book, The Roots of Rock Drumming.
Yes, yeah.
And that's how I found that out from. In fact, there's in the photo section of the Modern Drummer Legends book, which you're in there, of course, and there's a picture of me with the Brian Bennett, Clem Cattini, and Bobby Graham, three of the top
Yeah.
British session drummers from the '60s. Like, and that photo was taken when I was over there doing some interviews for that book.
That's a
I
great
heard a
photo.
lot of
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was gonna say those were the guys. They were the
Yeah,
the Hal Blaines and the Earl
that's right.
Palmers and of London, of
Yep.
British music. Um, hey, speaking, you just mentioned Crosby, Stills and Nash. Joe Vitale
Yeah.
is watching, and he says, you're awesome, Steve. Love your playing." So the
Well,
great Joe
tell him
Vitale.
thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Joe. I had
Um,
records that he was on way back when, like
yeah.
with Joe Walsh. Yeah,
Great drummer. Really, really
yeah.
great drummer. Yeah. Love him. Yeah.
In fact, I think before he played I had with Joe Walsh, I had the Funk 49, the
Yeah.
James Gang.
The James Gang.
That
Right.
that was one of my favorite albums. The
Yeah.
other I mentioned it is like I used to listen to Woodstock all the time. It was a triple album.
I remember. Yeah. The
Had
soundtrack.
some
Yeah.
pretty great stuff on it, including like Santana with Michael Shreve,
Yeah.
Gregorico, those drummers also played. Rick, uh, 10 years after.
Oh,
Who is
Rick
it?
Wakeman.
No,
Um,
no, Rick. Who is the guitar player? It was his
oh,
brother.
Alvin Lee. Rick Lee.
Yeah,
Rick Lee was
that's
the
right.
drummer. Alvin Lee was the
Yeah,
guitar
yeah.
player. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
all of that. And then, and I think I mentioned is like the Joe Cocker interpretation of A Little Help with My Friends. Whoever played on that was somewhat of the influence of the drumming that I did on Open Arms. It's not
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
copied that note for note or anything, but just somehow that the way he played that 3/4
Yeah.
uh,
Blap, blap,
feel.
bloom. Blap, blap, bloom. But yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
never thought of that. I think it was Jim Gordon. I'm pretty sure that was Jim Gordon, but I'm
could
not
have been.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I know that I think that there's a live version with both Jim Gordon and Jim Keltner, maybe double drumming on that. Am I
I'm just talking
imagining
about the Woodstock version.
the
That's the only
Woodstock
one
version? Yeah,
Yeah, that's the only one I know.
yeah. Wow.
So yeah,
No, there's some great. I want to just touch on a couple more quick things here before we time goes by quick. Time
it does.
flies when you're having fun.
Yep.
Um, there was a quote in the book in your first interview, 1981 interview in Modern Drummer that I thought was great, and it was so fun, as you pointed out at the beginning, that
Yeah.
they put all your different features in this as a comprehensive again, worth the price of it just for that, just to have everything in one place. But toward the end of your first interview in 1981, you're talking about using syndrums and snares at home. I
Yeah,
guess like sort of like making loops and practicing to them, and um,
right.
which I thought was great. And it was just kind of cool to hear you mention snare, because I think everybody remembers syndrums, and snare is
Yeah,
one that I think sort of gets lost in the mix, so to speak, in terms of like one of the early electronic
right.
pads. But what you say is so cool, and I mean, I'm sort of give it away, but people can read this because you talk about it in more detail. But you said, I haven't used them live or on any records because we want these records to stand the test of time. Basically, we want them to, to be great now, to be great in the future. And this was 1981 that you said this, Steve. I thought it's so
I
cool.
know.
You
It's
said,
just a,
yeah. You said, I don't, I just think if I use these things, they're a fad. It's going to date these records. And I thought, you were only in 1981, 26 years old, roughly,
right.
um, to have that kind of foresight into, because it would have been easy to just go, I'm going to put this shit all over these records,
I
uh,
know.
no, it's
And there
great.
are some records that people did that on, and they do sound dated at
They
this
sound
point. There
dated.
was, yeah, there was, I don't know what it was, but I just knew that it was a fad. Those electronic sounds were interesting and fun, but they weren't going to stand the test of time.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did use some Simmons pads live in the Frontiers tour, and there's some pictures where
right.
you can see my kit with the Simmons pads. I don't remember that there's any Journey recordings with the Simmons pads.
I don't think
Or
so, but I remember when you used them, and you had them by your hi-hat,
like,
right? Or
well, I
off to
had
the
two on the right and two on the left.
two on the right and two on the left. And they were like
Yeah,
triggering, you were like sort of
I just
reinforcing the sounds, so to
I
speak.
guess so. It's hard. I don't even really remember what I did with them.
But they
So
weren't those disco-y sort of
no,
no,
no.
they
With
weren't
this
those.
with the Simmons drums, I got it like you get a meteor kind of sound.
Yeah.
In fact, I did use them on a Vital Information album uh, called Orion. My second Vital Information record, I used on about 3 songs. I set up my drum set, with acoustic bass drum, acoustic snare, and cymbals, but I used 3 or 4 Simmons toms. And
Right.
so that's on the second album called Orion on a couple of tunes. And you can tell they're Simmons, but they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
SDS
To me,
5, yeah.
it still works musically. But I do want to mention that. So there's a record label called Wounded Bird,
Hmm.
and they just released my first 4 Vital Information
Yes.
albums on CD, and it's called the complete uh, Columbia recordings of Steve Smith and Vital Information. So they Wounded Bird licensed those 4 albums from Sony. Now it's Sony that owns the albums that were recorded for Columbia. So that's 1983, the first album called Vital Information, 1984, Orion, 1986 was Global Beat, and 1988 was Fia Fiaga
Yeah.
Celebration. And so and it's a CD only release. So Wounded Bird puts out CDs for the music aficionados that are
Yeah.
listening to, and they and I went through my tape closet. I have this little tape closet here in Ashland. And I was searching for master tapes for these 4 albums, and I did find 4 quarter-inch safety copies of each of these albums. And it's like when you make those safety copies way back when, you figure, when am I ever going to use this? But I
Wow.
actually, yeah. So I sent those to my mastering engineer in New Jersey, Jim Brick. He had them baked, put on digital, and so I'm not going to say they were remastered because they were just mastered
Hmm.
from the original tape. So it's like a brand new mastering of these 4 albums, and they sound incredible.
Yeah.
They sound better than they ever did because of, you know, his expertise, the equipment that he used, and so they sound pretty great. So uh, that is now available. It's a 4 CD set. It's all, you know, one set, and I will be selling them on my website, vitalinformation.com, you know, starting in the next week, and then
Great.
and there'll be a, you know, it'll be on Amazon and other
Yep.
places
Yep.
where you can find CDs in great record stores, like
And
the one we have here in Ashland, Oregon, the
great.
Record Coop.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we
Yeah,
nothing like a great record store, you know.
it
Yeah.
is. It's totally fun.
I was just going to say too, and I know we talked about the Fabric of Rhythm, the code where you can download the 14 tracks, but you're
Mhm.
going to also make that available as a standalone. Maybe we talked about that already, but just we should
Yeah, no,
come
I
back to
am
that.
going to release that at some point in the next few months. I'm going to release the Fabric of Rhythm, like to iTunes and, you know, other various streaming services. So that will eventually come out, and there'll be a bonus track. I did find a bonus track
Oh,
for
great,
that too.
great.
You know, a 15th track. So
That's great.
that
Well,
didn't
there's
fit on the vinyl. It wouldn't fit on the vinyl, so I
oh,
saved
that's
it.
good
Because
old
of
bonus
time, you know,
tracks.
I put 22 minutes on the side on the vinyl. That's stretching it already. It's a bit long.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you mentioned the section in the book. I'm just seeing if I can find it real quick without taking too much time here.
Yeah,
It's under the part where it's Steve's friends, and there's some great photos in there.
right.
And yeah, and there's that great photo of us. Thank you for putting that in there. And I kind of
Thank
thought
you
there'd
for
be,
sending that.
oh, you're
Yeah, I
welcome.
didn't
You're
have
welcome.
that. Yeah, it's a great picture of you and me and Dennis Chambers and Vinnie Colaiuta. And
That's
in the
right.
background, Lenny DiMuzio. You can
How
see
perfect
Lenny.
is that? I know. I know. It's I
And
love
that
that.
was at a hang at Riles, right? We were
That's
hanging out
right.
at Riles after a
Ex-
Vital Information gig.
It was
So,
and the backstory with that was it was after the let's see if I can bring this up here. There it is right there.
oh yeah,
It was number 3. It was
yeah,
after a Berkeley event. It was John Blackwell, rest his soul, had done a tribute to his daughter, and
uh-huh.
Vinny and Dennis had come out to play at it at Berkeley on that Saturday night, and then you were in town with Vital Information, and so we, rocketed over there across town after they were done, and we caught your second set, and it was a great
That's very
hang.
cool. Thanks for coming over.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's
absolutely.
Lenny. There's Lenny in the background.
How about that? How great is that? I know that Lenny was in the background there. Um, and funny story. There's just I've told you this before. I just remember at the end of the night, I think I was trying to help you pack up your drums, and Dennis came over and wanted to try your cymbals out. Do you remember this? And you,
Go ahead, tell the story.
and
It's
you,
not
you
in the. This story's not in the
yeah,
book.
this is bonus content right here,
Yeah,
and it's just because we love Dennis. So he's playing your Bill Stewart. I forget what did we call
it's
that
a
thing? It was
complex.
complex dry ride or complex, yeah, ride.
Yeah.
And he's playing it, and it sounded really good. And he turns to me and he says, "Hey man, how come mine doesn't sound this good?"
Right.
Like, and he had that, that look he gives you
Yeah,
when
like
Dennis,
why
like,
are you sending him the good stuff?
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, and I'm just like, it had been such a long day, and I was just exhausted,
Right.
going, Dennis, please.
No, I'm
But
sure yours sounds great, but there is that sometimes that Peter Erskine said the same thing to me in that event that we did the Big Firth where we played with the members of Snarky Puppy, Big Firth
oh yeah,
Live,
Big
and I
Firth
and
Live,
I
yeah,
and I did the Vital Information tune, and then Peter played um, one of his tunes, and I had one of his little splash cymbals that he helped design, and he played mine. He was like, "That sounds better than mine." How come they didn't send me that one?
yeah. I know. That's the thing about cymbals.
It is.
Oh, too funny, too funny. Well,
Yeah.
our friend Bob Sedlowski had asked a question earlier, and I know we're sort of running out of time, but he had He just asked about how challenging it was to play with Hiromi, playing with Hiromi,
Mm,
and I know you talk about that in the book too,
I do, yes.
um, and
It
maybe
was very challenging. When I first got the music, I have to say I was pretty shocked. It kind of freaked me out because it was, well, some of the tunes were literally 10 pages long,
wow,
and very hard music with a lot of odd time signatures, or even like changing time signatures bar to bar. I do. It was easy to read her charts because she wrote them by hand,
mm,
which I really prefer versus, let's say, a computer generated chart. It was actually, by writing it by hand, it was easier to read than if it had been a computer chart. Um, so that was helpful, but nevertheless, it was really hard music. But I had the really excellent guide of hearing the albums that um, Simon Phillips recorded. So Simon
mhm,
Phillips had already done the hard work of getting the original music and then coming up with a great drum part. But the music was not simple. It wasn't like you just play a simple beat and
yeah,
the
yeah,
music happens. It was like the drum parts were compositional, and so I used his playing as a blueprint, and I learned what Simon played, and then went from there. So each night I say I played maybe 50% of what I played was like verbatim what Simon played on the record, but then there was parts that were open and
hmm,
free that I could interpret my own way. So it was a hard gig, but a very rewarding gig.
yeah,
And I did it over the course of 4 years, because during that time Simon was still a member of Toto, so he wasn't available for touring with Hiromi all the time, and I was the sub, the one and only sub
yeah.
with that band. So it was always Anthony Jackson on bass, and then either Simon or myself on drums. So it was great music, hard to play, brought my playing to a new level.
Well, that's
And
something for you to say
yeah,
that,
it did. It did, because the music was difficult. Not all of it was difficult, but I'd say most of it was difficult. But the other thing was, the drummer in the band was the second soloist. So it was a piano trio,
yeah, yep,
but generally it wasn't like a traditional piano trio at all. Like I think you'd think like a Bill Evans trio with a great bass player and a great drummer, and the
hmm,
second soloist in a traditional piano solo is the bass player. So the piano player
right,
would play a solo and the bass player would play a solo. Maybe a couple of the tunes you'd trade eights with the drummer or something. But with Hiromi's music, it was like kind of full on jazz rock fusion, and the drummer had a solo in almost every song.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
drummer was the second soloist, and most of those solos were in an odd time signature, or something, maybe a shifting time signature. And so that required a lot of practice,
yeah.
for me to be real comfortable soloing and all these different time signatures on a nightly basis. So
Yeah,
it was a pleasure to play with. And but the other thing, and I do mention this in the book, this idea of being self-contained, the idea of being so strong in your own playing that you're not relying upon what you're hearing from the other people around you to know where you are, to keep your place, to play in an odd time signature, to play, over the bar line in a more traditional song form or something, just to be, so self-contained that uh, whatever somebody else does doesn't throw you off. But also it gives you the freedom to play very extended phrasing, and if you're playing with other self-contained players, it doesn't throw them off.
right,
And I
yeah,
would say that those, like playing with Anthony Jackson and Hiromi, were two of the most, some of the most self-contained players that I ever played with. So no matter what I played, they never got confused.
yeah. You never had to worry about that. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
you could
and so
relax and
there's a certain freedom that comes with playing with players that are so self-contained like that you don't have to take care of them in
yeah,
the way when you're playing with other players that are like if I do something a little bit unusual, it's like, oh, then they don't know where one is. All of a sudden, it's like,
Yeah.
they get it all off center. So, which,
I won't mention
that
my bandmates. I won't mention anybody's
you
name.
won't.
No, I won't. No, but that's a great explanation of that. You're right. I mean that everybody's equally self-contained, like you say, so that I mean I've seen her a number of times. I don't know that I've seen you with her, but I've seen Simon a bunch of times with Hiromi,
Right.
and
We did
the
play at Scullers, I think a
I've
couple
never,
times.
I think I might have come then to see you. Now that you say that, boy, I'm sorry if I'm
Yeah, that was
forgetting.
in, yeah. But anyway, yeah.
No, I was just going to say.
But
I mean, the music is so intense that uh, you know you. I can see what you're saying. That having that sort of freedom in your own mind to know that uh, you know where you are all the time, and everybody else knows where you are and where they are.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that is a level of playing where there's different levels of the musicians that you play with, and different levels require different kind of playing. And
Mhm.
this is one of the subjects that I get into with Mark Griffith in the book, is if I'm playing with rock players who are very dependent upon hearing a real clear beat, and
Mhm.
then even hearing like the same fills night after night. If I even like, there's been, if I varied a fill sometimes on those, journey tours that I did in 2016 to 19, it could throw some people off, and that's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
all right, but you have to do it a couple of times to figure out, okay, I better not do that again.
Yeah.
Right? I better not do that again. So,
Yeah.
but then, then you go and you play with someone else, you know, it, where I'm playing with Mike Stern or something, and it's another level, and it's like, why are you playing that same fill every night? Like a
Yeah.
completely different way of looking at it. It's like, yeah, I guess that's not jazz anymore if I play the same fill, right? No, so then, you come up with something, and then it goes, and then we get to, the more advanced players, you can be very free,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you're not even playing a beat. Like let's say with, the more advanced players, you're playing a time feel and
Mm.
interpreting, and that's what great jazz is. Like everyone's playing the song, let's say you're playing the jazz standard, you're playing the song and you're keeping the form, but you can be very abstract in that. You don't have to play
Straight.
well
Yeah.
defined, ideas. They can be very free, but yet everyone keeps the center. And then there's a communication that happens.
Yeah.
And then when in the best of those situations, you can get into like this zone where you, like I use the word, you transcend time and space.
Yeah.
You just go like to this
Yeah.
other level of, which is one of the reasons that one plays music that feels so good. You can get beyond the everyday experience of life, and you just go to this like spiritual zone where the musicians are meeting in some other place, and then the music is happening and you're just watching it in a way.
Yeah.
You're part
Yeah.
of it, but you just get out of the way of it. It's like you don't
Yeah.
want to get in the way of it. So
That's that's
it's a
very
good
cool.
place to end, right about there.
Well, this has been so great, Steve. I mean, I mean, is there anything that you wanted to cover that I haven't covered, we haven't covered in the book? I think
No, I think we've
we've really
covered it
kind of,
all.
we've
Yeah.
covered it all.
There is one last thing that I'll bring up, is that I will be at Birdland in September and October for 5 straight weeks.
All right.
So the middle of September, I play with my new version of Vital Information with Manuel Valera on keyboards and Yannick Guizdala on bass. So I'm gonna at this point, Vital Information is a trio,
Hmm.
and that'll be our first gigs that we'll be playing in September. But then after that, I'll do a week with a John Coltrane tribute group, then a week with a Bud Powell tribute group, and then 2 weeks with 2 different Ornette Coleman tribute
Wow.
gigs. So so it's like 5 weeks with 5 different bands at Birdland, both upstairs and some downstairs in the Birdland Theater. So I've listed the dates on my vitalinformation.com website to check that out. So I'm not going on big tours or anything right now, but I am, trying to just stay in New York and
Mm-hmm.
stay focused on, doing gigs in town, which has been great, really a great way to
Yeah.
do it.
And playing great music as you do. Yeah.
Good
Wow.
music, good musicians. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. It's like a residency,
It really is.
even though
Yeah.
it's not really it's just so happened it worked out that I'm doing these 5 weeks there. So anyway,
Well, I seriously, I'll be down there for one of those weeks,
great.
to catch a show or two for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All
Look
right,
forward
sounds
to it.
good.
Yeah. Well,
And the next
you know,
time I see your drum room, I want to see one of those gongs up on a stand.
all right. Okay. I know. That's my assignment.
That's right.
You always
And
leave me
let's
with an
start
assignment.
integrating it into the kit.
Sping, ding, a ding, ding, a ding, ding. Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching, everybody. This has been incredible, just like we all knew it would be. A big hand for the great Steve Smith, who
All right.
is officially now a legend.
A legend.
Been a legend as far
Thank
as
you,
I can
modern
remember.
drummer. Thank you, Dave Frangione.
Yeah, yeah. Big thanks to the MD
Yeah.
guys for this book. And everybody, please, you can download it right now on MD's site. You can, do the digital download or buy the book. Available next month, May 20th, Steve said. So, yeah, it's so great. You got to get it. So
Well,
thanks for
thanks for
watching,
putting
everybody.
this yeah, thanks, Johnny, for putting this together.
My
And
pleasure, Steve.
and it's always fun to talk and to hang out.
Likewise, buddy. Yeah.
It's great.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Steve Smith.